I have a bias for action. I believe that architecture extends beyond buildings and can impact space as small or as large as the context allows. When people find out I'm an architect, I'm often asked, where are your projects? Where do you work? Where? And since I only have worked in Chicago so far, I rattle off the dozens of neighborhoods that I've worked in. And the most common response after that is, I've never been over there. Do you do anything closer to here? And there's this tension between here versus there that are one of the many dichotomies of a city, and it is directly in these gaps created is where we work. And in a neighborhood named Roseland, much more over there than most, a cell phone image of a 2x4 is taken right before it cracks open Darian Albert's skull. Darian Albert was a 16-year-old student on his way home from high school, and he had no idea that he was going to be killed. One of the women that tried to interrupt that violence of that day was Tiawanda Piper, affectionately known to everyone as Mrs. T. Obviously impacted by this incident, T no longer saw opportunity in her neighborhood, potential and positivity in public space. And really, why should she? I mean, Roseland is wallpapered with vacant sites like this. It's completely anonymous, it's completely without assets, right? It's a desert in every sense of the word: food, economic, opportunity. And when people are thought of as statistics, like these 5 at-risk young women right here, what really can we start to invest in? That narrative of Roseland was already set in black and white before we ever started working in the neighborhood. Of all the stories that were written about the neighborhood in 2012, 90% of them were negative. Think about that. 90% of your home, your life, your being is publicly perceived to be negative. And what we have found is that it's not the voice of the city that is being heard, but it is the vice of the city that is selling. And if we want to change the story, we had to change the storyteller. And so we had to find a way to engage and make a commitment and try and find a way to take the commitment to routine that we have within human nature to just pass these sites by. And we did that by asking, listening, and making a new commitment to stay and see something through. And there's no way that you could carry this all alone. We've been fortunate to work with an amazing partner, Public Workshop, and a team of teenage girls to make design visible. We spent 2 weeks working and hustling on the sidewalk to transform one site, one anonymous site, hustling with the hustlers, learning how to use power tools, building confidence and trust. And we did all of this because we wanted to show that the impact of design was not only going to be in the final aesthetics of the product, but it was going to be in a process that allowed for rapid prototypes to be created, realized, and critiqued in this very rapid and public fashion. And if you don't think every person on that block told us our opinion over those 2 weeks, you'd be mistaken. And so we did this. We allowed ourselves to get out of the perceptions that we have of ourselves as architects, as teenagers, as hustlers, and we did that by building Switzerland in Chicago. Listening to the community, we heard a neighborhood that wanted a space that was neutral, a space that was as far away from the South Side as possible. And so on some sticky, hot, sweet August days, we started to build this blue path that became a river that ran through these canyons of mountains that were created by hundreds and hundreds of tied knots of rope that create this surface that you could climb on. And we had to do it in style, I dare you to ask a contractor to build you something with 3-inch long, hot pink press-on nails and really see what you could get, because we got Switzerland. And we did this, and what happened over the course of those 2 weeks is we saw a fundamental change in the potential that the young women saw that they could impact, a change and transformation in the power of design that the community saw, and the resurrection of hope in one person. And this becomes a model for how we can think about engaging in our communities and social innovation in a way that brings in a more authentic viewpoint to all of our projects. And those small acts of civil design disobedience really go and highlight how poorly our formal systems are serving society. And we had to do all that because we had to start with building before we could get to the actual building. About 3 years ago, we've been working on this project for about 3 years in a neighborhood that has this sort of dreamy desolation to it. It's a neighborhood that tells the story of George Pullman and the rise of the modern labor movement, the first African-American unions, and one of the many failed utopias that we have in our city's history. Down in Pullman, we had George Pullman who wanted to create everything for his workers, a place that they could work and live that was very different than the status quo of that time. He had brick homes, he had factories, and of course, he had a firehouse. And our client, when they approached us because they wanted us to build a new center for them that would house after-school programming for young women 12 through 18, the same statistical anomalies that built Switzerland over 2 weeks. And so what we found is when we designed for the system of that organization, we created something better than just designing for a building. It has challenged me throughout the whole entire 3 years to think about ways that we can bring more women into our profession and break glass ceilings, not by giving them another doll, but by giving them a hammer. And our spaces are as profound as we want them to be. We have to realize that it doesn't always have to look like architecture, that it doesn't always have to be permanent, that these ephemeral experiences create this collective memory that becomes our city. Design is a foil. It is a mirror that reflects the latent conditions and factors of our built environment, our funding, our zoning, our policy, our ethos, and ultimately, our will. Design, it's a verb, it is a tool, and it is an action that we engage in every day at a variety of scales. In the end, as I thought about it over the past years of being an architect, I'm really okay if you never see my buildings. That's fine by me, because I need you to see a new system of architecture that can have impact beyond the building and start to create an ecosystem of building with equity and empathy. We need to define the context before we design the content. And this is the way, when we think about this, that we can actually create infinite impact. Thank you.